YouTube channels, and please have your questions coming so we can get to it quickly. For those who are new to the session, these sessions are live and occur every 2 weeks on Thursdays at 9 a.m. Pacific or 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And we try to bring awesome people, awesome contributors to the panel so that they can answer your questions live, for all the Delta questions you have. So you can ask questions about Delta Lake open source software, how to use it, what are the features coming, and just in general, any questions about contributing as well. So we had a lot of sessions in the past where we discussed connector community, how we work with other ecosystem, as well as what were the features released in 1.2. So without further ado, let me quickly direct back to the panel so that they can introduce themselves. They are big names already, and if you don't know them, it's good to have a recap of who they are. So let's start with you, Dom, who is our special guest today.
Yeah, thank you. Dominique Brezinski, I'm a distinguished engineer at Apple. I work in the information security space, but predominantly on our big data pipelines for security telemetry for doing detection and response. And been a Databricks customer for 4+ years now, I think. And our use case was sort of the genesis for Delta Lake, and then things like autoloader and a few other kind of core features in Databricks. So have had the pleasure of being able to work very closely with the team over time to refine and extend stuff. And only recently got to a point where I could actually start to do real contributions to the open source project as well, given normal corporate politics and intellectual property stuff.
But you got through that, Dom. That's important.
Yeah, years later. Yes.
That's really exciting. We are looking forward to it, Dom, and thank you for the introduction and your journey with Databricks, Delta Lake so far. TD, how about you?
Hey everyone, I'm TD. I am a software engineer in Databricks. I have been involved in the Spark stuff for over 11 years now, being involved with Delta since its inception, building Delta for 4+ years. Yes, Dom, by the way, Dom is selling himself short. His requirement of the scale of handling data in a transactionally correct way with high quality at petabyte scale is what led to building Delta. And so he is the fundamental idea behind this entire thing that started this now 4-year-old journey, 4+ year old journey. So, but along the way, I have had the privilege to build some of the stuff in Delta, and right now I continue to work specifically focusing on the Delta open source side of things, features, connectors and stuff. So I'm really excited to talk about all the next set of features coming in the next release, as well as other connectors we are working on in parallel.
Yeah, that's right, TD. Dom came up with a lot of requirements, and Michael and Dom talked, and that's where the idea seeded. And it's been an amazing journey with you being our primary contributor as well, TD. With that, why don't you introduce yourself, Gerhard?
Yeah, hey everyone, my name is Gerhard Brueckl. I'm working at a company called Pico as a data engineer and solution architect. Well, my focus is mainly in the Microsoft area and working with Databricks since it actually was available in the Azure cloud. Same accounts for Delta Lake, and contributing the Power BI connector to the Delta Lake. So basically allowing you to read a Delta Lake table natively in Power BI without the need of having a Databricks cluster running.
Which is awesome. Very awesome. That is very awesome. Like this came out when you contributed that this came out of nowhere, and it was like, wow, I didn't even know this was possible. Like making Power BI directly read Delta. This is amazing.
Thanks.
That's great. So with that, just to the panelists, I want to ask a question on whenever you're working on a new feature, what are some of the things that motivates or leads to building that specific feature? Any of you can answer that question.
Yeah, let me start. Although I guess most from my inspiration, let's say, comes from customer demands that I most of the time get directly from them, and then I say, okay, well, that makes sense to add to the connector. Sometimes it's also like if there is like new features that get into Delta, that I also try to add them as soon as possible. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's great to know. Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
basically
Didi, go ahead.
as well customer demand, like not just customer, it's just user community demand. Like
Yeah.
customers is only a small part. Databricks is only a small part of the much larger community. So it's a community demand. A community demand led to all the new features we've been adding in the last few releases and the next release that's going to happen. So yeah, that's simple answer.
Yeah, I think another point would also be like if there are any requirements or feature requests from the community, you can just post them in the Git repo, open an issue, and then we'll have a look.
Yep.
Yes, correct.
Independent of the actual connector, obviously.
That's awesome. Talking about connectors, Gerhard, you were working on some of the Power BI enhancements. Would you like to tell us, what are the new things you're working on right now? What is your current focus?
Yeah, so I just recently created a new PR, which is mainly about complex data types being handled correctly. So in the let's say old version, you have like this static or this predefined data types in Power BI. One of them is any, which could obviously be anything, but now those are actually show up properly, especially when it comes to nested fields and complex objects like arrays, structs, maps. Those work fine now. There's also a new feature which allows you to use the filter statistics that Delta generates to do some better file pruning. And I think these are the two main things.
Nice. That's awesome.
That's awesome. And related to that, Tiri, are there any other connectors that we are working on right now?
Yes. So I think one of the main connectors that is our current focus is basically Flink. So about a couple of months ago, we released the first version of Flink Sync to write to Delta tables. Now we are very close to code complete, and hopefully we're going to release something before the Data Plus AI Summit for the Flink source, so reading from Delta tables. So with that, we have the end-to-end Flink reading and writing from Delta tables complete. I think the next step after this is SQL support, table API support. So there's like a whole set of things. We're very actively working on the entire Flink support and bringing it up to speed, to similar to the Cover Spark support.
Got it. And Dom, from your perspective, right? In 1.2, we added a lot of features on optimize, as well as column mapping, generated column support for merge, all of these features. What is your take on implementing these features for Delta data engineering pipelines? Would love to understand a little bit more on how you are either using these features or maybe think about how this is revolutionizing data engineering in general.
Yeah, I mean, all these features are huge. Getting optimization, I think, to the community has probably been one of the most sought after, features that we've had on Databricks since the beginning. But to get out to the open source community is huge, especially releasing things like Z ordering, right, and being able to provide the advantages that the stats provide for pruning. For us, all the other stuff is super quality of life. Being able to kind of remap columns and column names, having these types of features when you're having to do data engineering across hundreds or thousands of input data sets, right, and all the schema complexity that comes with that stuff. Any features to be able to kind of make things better or correct things. I mean, no matter how on it you try to be, If you have a team of people doing data engineering, somebody is going to like stray from convention or standard at some point, and being able to correct things with like remapping and renaming stuff is super important. I know it's come up in our team many times, like, can we do column reordering, you know, and you know, all those types of changes really can make a difference at some point or another, without having to just kind of recreate everything. Generated columns, that is super interesting for us. We've always, you know, we have a lot of time series data. We ingest about 5 petabytes a day, most of it being time series data. And so most of our tables have a date partition that's derived from the timestamp that we've done explicitly, right? And being able to start to do generated columns where the users don't have to specify the predicates, right? But can be more natural around time ranges and things like that, and have that then underneath the covers turn into actual partition predicates on date, or even more narrow on a time basis like hourly, is super valuable. And we're actually really excited about being able to use those features going forward as we kind of get into our second generation of data models. So watching generated columns advance, right? The basics have been laid out there, right? But obviously there's more to come in that area as well. So exciting.
You laid out perfectly, Dom. These are the features which, you know, people have been getting excited. And actually, as a data engineer myself back then, working with a lot of like timestamps and, you know, having generated columns automatically generated for data engineers, I think that's a huge thing as well. So just adding 2 cents. Somebody asked about index management and maintenance. Divakar, can you elaborate if you had a question specific around that? If not, we can take another question, which is around Z ordering. So anybody from the panel, can they help us understand, you know, what is the Z ordering we are talking about for the next release?
Okay. Dom, should I take this? Okay. Dom is on.
Yeah, I'll jump in a second. I just got to go wrangle a dog.
All right. All right. So Z order. Okay. So basically think Z ordering is basically a very fancy form of multi-column clustering, data clustering. So if you have to search on multiple columns, like for example, you have a search query that filters on that puts filters on multiple columns. If you have the data sorted by a single column and you're querying by filter, you can use binary search to figure that out, or you can do like searching through a single column sorted data is easy. The moment you have to do multi-column searches, if you do the simple sorting like a primary order sorting, like sort by X, column X first and then column Y, doesn't give you the best possible results when you want to search by column X or Y. So these Z order, and this is one of the algorithms in this class of algorithms called space filling curves, which does much fancier type of sorting, or in the general sense clustering of data, such that you can cluster the data by any number of columns, and searches using that columns will be faster. Now, historically, this was another one of those features that was built specifically to handle the scale that Dom needed to handle, like searching, like having queries run on terabyte, petabyte scale table, single table having terabyte plus of data, and still returning within seconds to find that few columns that satisfy that filter across multiple columns. It was built specifically for DOM, and now finally, after this many years, we're seeing the transition that we are finally putting it in open source. It has been merged. The next release will have the Z order this thing. So what, from the user point of view, you will be able to run this command called optimize the order, and that will rearrange your data in the table based on the columns you want. It will cluster the data based on those columns. And after that, all the filter queries on that column would be much, much, much faster, because it will be able to eliminate files completely without having to scan them for that particular value you want in the filter.
Yeah.
And yeah, please go ahead, Dom.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like I think the Genesis story, and this actually speaks tons for TD's team and Michael and a bunch of the other people at Databricks. But when we were originally, talking about this kind of selective search use case, Michael and I were in a room, and it was like, oh wait, there's min-max stats. I'm like, okay, so we could sort. Oh, except that we often need to search by source IP or destination IP, for instance, in like network telemetry stuff. And I see Michael kind of go, right? And then we leave the room. And so I'm expecting to just like have to deal with normal sorting and like primary, secondary kind of sort type stuff and see how it goes. And about 2 weeks later or something, Michael's like, hey, can you run a couple of like pieces of code against this data? And I need to generate some statistics and look at some stuff. And so I do this experiment, and then not long later, like comes back and it's like, here, try and run this. And it was basically like the alpha version of Z order, right? And we run it on a bunch of data, and then we try some searches by one column, the other column, values from both columns. And it was outstanding. Like right away, we were able to just exclude like 90 to 99% of the data within, very large tables, just based on the fact that, now multiple columns were sorted in a way that the min-max stats, would be sort of tight around files. And it's likely if we had, values that were very sparse within our data set, that they would be nicely isolated into one or a small number of files in the table. And then, the Delta reader would do its thing, evaluate the metadata, look at the query plan against the column stats there, and be able to generate a physical plan, right, that just targeted the Parquet files that could possibly have an answer in it. And being able to do this kind of Z ordering or clustering sort over that has allowed us now to pick, up to a few, columns that would be primary kind of search columns we use in data sets. And then we can Z order by that. And we effectively take, we have 20 petabyte tables. And for doing highly selective searches, like you still can do these in very reasonable time. And then we have some other tricks we use to be able to search and stuff like that. But this is a super valuable, critical thing. And the great thing about it is that it's one of those things that you can choose to use or not, right? You can choose to spend the compute time to Z order a table if you get advantage out of it, or you can not, right? If you don't do selective queries and you're not paying like a right time penalty to always maintain an index, right? If that's not what you need. But if you do, you have the flexibility to kind of loop this in, right? And optimize your data in this way. And you also can change it, which is super important, right? You can take the same table, you can Z order it by, 2 columns and then decide those aren't the best columns and change it to a different 2 or 3 columns. And that works just fine.
Yep.
And to do that, Dom, do you, as a best practice, do you recommend, running that only on a specific test data set and not on the full data set?
Yeah, I mean, if you have huge tables and you're gonna try to, reorder them, you're fundamentally reading all the data and rewriting it, right? Mm-hmm. So it's best to take an evaluative data set that's less expensive and figure out, where you're gonna get the biggest bang for the buck before you reprocess, a petabyte plus table in order to optimize it. Another great thing though, Z order is incremental and to a large degree, right? And so once you kind of get a big table, and then if you're, adding data to it at a less frequent rate, subsequent Z orders, will be less expensive because they'll just predominantly use most of the new data, right? So.
That's wonderful. Thanks for going into a little bit details down. That's always helpful. Gerhard, you had one point there. Do you want to go ahead?
I think I just wanted to mention you can also do it on a partition level, so you don't have to do it for the whole table. You can just do it for like the most recent partitions that are probably queried the most often, which to some degree limits or decreases the impact on your overall table and storage and processing time that you need to actually create the indexes. Yeah.
And so you could have, like, depending on the pattern of your data in different partitions, you could have different partitions z-ordered in a different way, which is awesome. It completely allows you to evolve with time, based on your query patterns on different partitions and stuff.
Yeah, that's something, that's a great point, and something that's really interesting in like the Delta Lake model. The fundamentals are there to be able to do a lot of operations only on a partition and have and be partition independent, right? On the way that you do certain things. You can choose to just bin pack one partition or a set of partitions, just z-order or z-order differently, right? And I think over time, we'll see even additional flexibility come about as we build things on top of the Delta protocol, right? They can take advantage of that and get that kind of partition isolation or reduction of work, right?
Got it. And when we do the different styles of partition, does it go into its own specific folder, like different? Does it generate different folders on specific partitions?
That's an interesting question. So
let me take that. So let me take it from protocol point of view. Is that the Delta protocol does not require different logical partitions to be present in different subdirectories. But by default, the way Delta evolved over time and stuff, we do that, do the actual subdirectory by default to kind of, because we were inspired by Hive's style of partitioning. But we don't have to do that. The Delta protocol doesn't require that, because the partition values of a particular file is explicitly captured in the Delta log, and what path it is saved in is immaterial for that. It could be saved in a subdirectory or not, does not matter. So the Delta log knows what is the partition values of that file.
Yep. And indeed, in early days of Delta, the default or the only way was the Hive style, like kind of directory tracking partition stuff. And we had such high IO rates against S3 that that actually didn't work, right? We would get throttled by S3 because we were hitting kind of hot spots in our front end partition map and needed to do random prefix. And so there was an option on Delta Lake that instead of writing a traditional Hive style and mapping in, right, it would basically just generate random prefixes on the file set and write them in that way. And that gave us a much better distribution, right, across S3 and much higher performance. And even though S3 has increased that performance threshold that they no longer really recommend that, indeed, our IO rates are still so high that they require that from us. Right, and we have to do sort of random prefix on all our large tables. But that simple flexibility that the partition is actually a tag value, right, that's represented in the metadata, and then the file path can be entirely disjoint from that, and the readers all do the right thing and can still prune by partitioning, right, correctly.
That's wonderful. I have two more good questions here. So one is about, is it possible to create the CDC tables in Delta Lake? That's an awesome question.
Yes. So let me reinterpret the question, and hopefully my interpretation is the question is correct. So can you query row level changes from a Delta table? And quick answer is yes. Now you can. So in the next release, another big feature we're going to release is change data feed, where it is you set a table property in Delta table, and with that, all write operations that are doing row level modifications, like merge or update or delete, like there's modifying a single row or in a file and rewriting files because of that, will save the row level changes as a separate set of files so that you can query just those row changes, whether what got updated, what got deleted, what got inserted, as very efficiently. And with that, both in batch queries as well as streaming queries. So, and the exciting thing about that is that with that, you can really build end-to-end incremental pipelines. Like you can have some change data coming in from external system, merged onto a Delta table as your like first level of tables, like bronze tables. Then from that table, you can still propagate the row level changes to the second level of table with more cleanup and stuff for silver tables, and then so on and so forth. Before this feature, it was not very efficient to do that because you could only read files that were entirely rewritten because only one of the rows had changed. So you would have to read the entire file, which is 99% unmodified data, just to process that single row. But with this feature, we keep them separately. It's so that you can read them efficiently. It's an opt-in feature. So if you don't care about reading row level changes, you don't have to. So it's completely opt-in. There is no cost associated with it if you don't want it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome, TD. CDF is a feature that that is coming up, and we discussed last time. I think we only have 3 more minutes. We'll take one question and we'll just give a recap on what to expect in 3 weeks. So there's a question about, is it possible maintaining the indexes as online activity during business hour or its downtime activity? So maintaining indexes. I'm not really sure on this question. I think less context, but TD, any thoughts?
Yeah, I can take a crack at it. So
yeah.
So at this point in time, the indices that Delta supports is not, it's more like min-max values of each column in each file. So that's not a traditional index in the academic sense, but that is very good to eliminate files. If you're looking for a particular value 5 and a file has only data for that column between 10 and 15, you don't need to read that file. So that is how column stats, what it's called, is used. Now, so business hours versus non-business hours, it's all about how you arrange the table, organize the data in the table. If you're like separating out business and non-business hours into separate partitions, like partition by hour or something, then you can potentially have different data organization, like one thing just compacted, the other thing Z-ordered, the other things you have to do a different thing. You could do that to take best advantage of the kind of queries that you get on business hour data versus non-business hour data.
Got it. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Now I get the question too. Awesome. Any other thoughts which Gerhard and Dom, you would like users or the community to know about for Delta Lake specific roadmap? Yeah.
I think I mentioned the new features that are coming to the Power BI connector in the near future.
That's awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. And go ahead, Didi. Go ahead, Didi. Yeah, okay. I was going to close, but
yeah, I just 30 seconds left. So I want to highlight to drum up some excitement in the community, because we are very excited that as part of the next release that we're hoping to get out before the Data Plus AI Summit, which is by June last week. In next few days, we're going to announce a preview of that release so that the community can start testing all these cool features that we've been talking about, change data feed, optimize Z order, a whole bunch of other stuff. So if the user, so the community can start testing them out even before the release. We're going to make a preview, so stay tuned, join the Slack channel, join the email group. We're going to announce in all of them so that we can play around with it even before the release and provide us feedback. If something went horribly wrong, please let us know immediately, post GitHub issues, post on the Slack channel and stuff. So
yeah, so that's super important. Thanks for calling that out, TD. We will be releasing that through our Google group and Slack channel. I'll point links in this YouTube recording, and please do take a crack at it if you are actively building on Delta Lake. So that would be really appreciated. And just as TD called out, we have Data and AI Summit coming up last week of this month, and on June 29th. You will get to see all these faces plus others in the community. So please come join us. I can send the schedule for the event where you can meet other contributors of Delta Lake that you may not have met, and the community. So looking forward to it. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks.
Awesome.
The dog, one of the dogs had to put in.
You in the summit. Gerhard, will you be able to?
No, I'm doing 2 remote sessions, but for personal reason, I wasn't able to join. I mean, it's in San